Fear spreads as DeSantis investigates college professors teaching diversity and inclusion. In 1953, McCarthyism was at its height in creating fear in American society. The senator from Wisconsin was suggesting that there was a Red Scare and a communist behind every corner. In Hollywood, entertainers in 1953 were facing the effects of the Red Scare through blacklist of America's entertainers and industry through the Hollywood blacklist. In 1953, Lucille Ball, the #1 star in the world, fell to this blacklist that nearly destroyed her career. She was not indoctrinating America to some secret agenda. And eventually, the blacklist, the Red Scare, and even Senator Joseph McCarthy was moved to the trash heap of those that try to gain power by selling fear. Fast forward 70 years later to 2023, and this time, instead of a Senator McCarthy, a Florida Governor DeSantis is eerily creating a scapegoat and fear around every corner again. Those scapegoats are the LGBTQ+ community, the Black community, the trans community, children, drag queens, and now college professors. An English professor at Florida Palm Beach Atlantic University says his job is under review now after his employer told him it received a complaint that he is indoctrinating students. Professor Sam Jokel said, quote, "The racial justice unit is what got me in hot water," end quote. He said he had been teaching a unit on racial justice in classes for many years without any complaints, until his provost and dean said this week they needed to talk to him privately at the end of class. The two told him his contract renewal for next year would be on hold as they investigated the materials used in the racial justice unit. Jokel shared a letter from the university saying a decision about his employment would be made by March 15th. Jokel said, quote, "They told me they had concerns that I was indoctrinating students." That was the exact word they used, indoctrinating. "I had no idea this was coming," end quote. Jokel said his conversation with his employers indicated the investigation was prompted by a complaint from a parent. PBA is a private Christian university. DeSantis was on the campus of PBA on the exact same day. However, these actions may be coming to Florida's public universities, as Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has proposed plans to defund all diversity, equity, and inclusion programs at state colleges and universities in Florida. And his administration rejected a proposed advanced placement African American studies course in high schools, partly explained as being based on queer theory. Queer News Tonight has now spoken to 3 Florida Public University professors at 3 separate Florida institutions. They have alerted us that the investigation of the same diversity, equity, and inclusion program concerns in their classrooms. Several sources indicate all emails and texts with public universities and colleges are now being collected and reviewed by the state. Queer News Tonight can accurately report that the Union for College Educators in Florida and attorneys for many Florida universities are now actively involved in the growing investigations from Governor DeSantis and Florida's state government over professors believed to be involved in diversity and equality and inclusion programs. We will continue to follow this very disturbing story, straight out of the shameful headlines of 1953, except this is 2023. To me, this is an incredibly scary story. The reason we see the parallel connections to what happened in 53 is McCarthy ultimately destroyed his entire career. He was found to be essentially lying on the fact that in Hollywood, people in government in Washington, people in business were being compromised by communists, by the Soviet Union. Basically, after time, the story essentially falls apart. But the careers it destroyed in Washington, in business, and in Hollywood were still laid waste. And the amount of time to catch up to what was really being done took time for the pendulum to swing back. We are just now watching. We're just now beginning to tell this story in a different way to what we're seeing in schools, what we're seeing in our libraries, what we're seeing at our events at LGBT with drag queens, and now what we're seeing. This is not K through third. By the way, there's also breaking news about the expansion to 8th grade, but this is now college professors that are being investigated and gathering information of all of their texts and all of their emails to prove some kind of witch hunt that they're indoctrinating students. It's in my opinion, a very disturbing moment.
You know, my interest in law stemmed from a class I took in college called Law and Society. And then we were looking at constitutional law. We were looking at First Amendment issues. If we take this and expand it, these classes would be banned. And if we take it to law schools, we wouldn't be able to teach the Constitution at all, which makes absolutely no sense. And so this is incredibly problematic, and I hope that it gets stopped.
I'm curious, I want to piggyback on that observation. If the equity inclusion broad term definition is accepted, and he is able to defund and to every state president, every president of a state college and university has signed on to capitulate to the governor, and they've signed on saying that they'll follow his instruction. Do you suppose, because I haven't heard conversation about this, that it could be followed into law schools? Could it happen at Florida State and University of Florida?
They'll certainly try to, but not without a fight, right? So I don't know if you've seen Just Mercy, the movie with Michael B. Jordan. That movie, it's about my law school professor, Brian Stevenson, the founder of the Equal Justice Initiative. We're going to fight it, he's going to fight it, and we're all going to fight it because it cannot extend to that. Every single class essentially would run afoul of this law. And so it cannot happen, and I'm certainly concerned about it.
I also wonder, the universities, especially in Florida and across, the South, sports is a very big component of those schools. The schools that play in the SEC are typically the biggest, college football fans. I have not heard anything from the sports associations who are predominantly African American and Latino. And so you're now attending a school where you cannot teach diversity, equity, and inclusion, but playing sports representing this school. I challenge, the college, sports associations out there. We need to hear from them. We need to hear, how is this going to impact your players? Who wants to come to school here when your identity is not being able to be celebrated, educated, acknowledged?
I know y'all want to jump in. Please do. But I want to make an observation and comparative example of that. To your point, your challenge of sports and sports leagues and people that are associated to this to stand up. One clear example where they did not is the tourism industry. When Disney was attacked, Stacy Ritter, the executive director of Visit Lauderdale, said specifically in an interview with me that she was disappointed that the tourism industry of Orlando did not stand up vigorously in defense of Walt Disney World. And at the end of the day, Visit Orlando and other related tourism interest in organizations in Central Florida did not come to vigorous defense of Disney to say, you are damaging our tourism industry. It's a similar situation to what you just challenged. You wonder if Governor DeSantis has not created so much power that even that won't happen, because the Orlando tourism industry would not do that. And we reported last night in Queer News Tonight about the pressure that Tampa Pride is under. They lose 6 sponsors for $100,000, all out-of-state sponsors. And one of those sponsors is quoted as saying that if he can take on Disney, he can become president of the United States and then therefore take on any business he wants, including us. And it created a chill effect, fear. I just make the connection of the dots here.
Yeah, I'd like to address that in just a second. But first, didn't last year DeSantis replace a state university president? Well, I think it was University of Florida, He appointed his own person, didn't consult any other board members. So he's already taking over the universities at the highest level in a very partisan way, which deviates at least a lot further than it usually has in the past. And what I'm about to say next, I have no polling to back it up. It's just a feeling I've had from watching and covering news and watching sort of how things ebb and flow over time. I think DeSantis is at risk of becoming a victim of excessive power. He will become a victim of it. He's got supermajorities in the legislature. He can do literally anything he wants in the state. And if he's going to run, it's going to motivate the collar counties around Philadelphia and in Pennsylvania. It's going to motivate a little further out from Detroit in Michigan, where it would have been before. The Democratic Party is probably not going to put dime one into national elections next year into Florida after what happened last year. It's not worth it when you're going to have to put it into money to try and re-win Georgia, to try and shore up Arizona and Wisconsin. But I think that he's going to have such a track record that he's going to shore up the base. But if any of the moderates come out in any kind of meaningful number in the swing states, I think he's going to lose. And I think it's going to be his fault because he was too extreme in Florida. And Florida is a place that people watch.
Well, we've often made 1939 and 1953 references and comparisons here on the show on a regular basis. And what's taking place here in Florida is frightening enough, but the fact that Governor Despicable, aided and abetted by his fellow Republicans, seems to be unstoppable as he bulldozes his way across the strait in what's clearly a reign of terror. And that's probably the most horrifying thing of all. He really feels unstoppable.
LGBTQ plus news is vital for our community and for the broader world as a whole. We have enough enemies at Fox News. Tucker, Sean, and Laura are loud. We need passionate allies. Happening Out Television Network, Queer News Tonight, and It's Happening Out are literally out of the closet and into the headlines. Our community needs your support. Like this broadcast and subscribe now to ensure the growth of the entire LGBTQ plus community.